I had no idea what I was about to walk into that day. Honestly, if you'd asked me a few weeks ago, I would have told you my life was as simple as it gets. My name's Declan, I'm 34, and I've been married to Sophie for almost 6 years. But sometimes, even the most mundane moments can change everything. Sophie and I had what some would call a quiet marriage. We didn't fight often, but we also didn't do much to keep the spark alive. We lived in a small suburban town where nothing ever really happened. The most exciting part of our days was when I came home from work, ate dinner, and watched a couple of hours of TV before falling asleep. It was peaceful, predictable, boring, maybe, but it was comfortable. But lately, I started feeling something shift, though I couldn't exactly pinpoint what it was. Sophie started spending more time on her phone, even when we were sitting together. She'd be on social media, texting someone, or watching videos with headphones in. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe it was just the usual distraction people get from their phones. But then it became a regular thing, and I started noticing the little things. She was getting up earlier, doing more things without me, and even started canceling plans at the last minute. I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to be that guy. I trusted Sophie. I'd known her for years before we even got married. She was always the more outgoing one, the social butterfly, and I was the steady guy who liked routine. But that didn't mean I didn't appreciate her. She was everything I needed. But lately, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was invisible to her. Then, one evening, something happened that completely threw me off. It was a Tuesday, just like any other. I got home from work a little later than usual, and as I opened the door, I found Sophie sitting in the living room with a glass of wine, staring at her phone. Nothing unusual there, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at something on the screen so intently, like she was in a trance. I called her name. She didn't answer. I called her again, louder this time. She finally looked up, a forced smile spreading across her face. "Oh, hey, you're home," she said, almost as if she hadn't noticed. Her voice didn't sound right. There was something off, but I couldn't place it. I raised an eyebrow. "What's going on? Everything okay?" Yeah, just, reading some emails," she quickly replied, setting her phone down on the coffee table. Too quickly, like she didn't want me to see something. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I said nothing. I thought I was just being paranoid. But in that moment, something changed. I could tell. The air in the room felt heavier. It was as if Sophie and I were no longer in sync. She was always the life of the party, and now it was like I was sharing a space with someone who was slowly fading away. That night, I went to bed with a strange feeling lingering in my chest. I couldn't sleep, kept tossing and turning, replaying the moment over and over in my head. Was she really that detached, or was I just imagining things? The next day, I decided to do something I never thought I would. I wasn't proud of it, but curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed her phone while she was in the shower. I opened the messages first. There, at the very top of the list, was a thread from an unknown number. The conversation was recent, only a few days old. The messages were full of those cryptic, friendly but not friendly exchanges. Flirty. Too flirty. Sophie was laughing at things this person said, sending emojis I had never seen her send me. She had even shared a picture of herself, just her face, smiling like she had done in the past. But what really made my heart drop was the final message from that person. It was a single line. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you already." My stomach turned. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands shaking as I looked at the screen. Who was this person? Who was Sophie texting like this? Was she cheating on me? But I didn't confront her right away. No, I couldn't. My brain was a mess, scrambling for explanations. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was something innocent going on. But deep down, I knew. I knew something was happening behind my back, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I put the phone down and tried to go about my day, but my mind was racing. I kept picturing Sophie's face, the smile she had given me earlier, and the way she was hiding something. I couldn't stop thinking about that message. "I miss you already." Later that evening, I finally asked her, "Sophie, who's this?" I said, showing her the text conversation. Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment, I saw fear in her eyes. But she quickly recovered and laughed. "Oh, it's nothing. Just a friend from work. You know how I get with my colleagues, always joking around." Her laugh was forced. Too forced. My gut told me she was lying, but I didn't press. I wanted to, but I couldn't find the words. But as I went to bed that night, I knew one thing for sure. Something wasn't right. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't know Sophie the way I thought I did. The next morning, things took a turn I never saw coming. The following day was a blur. I kept replaying the events from the night before over and over in my mind, like a broken record. Sophie's reaction when I confronted her about the messages, the way she laughed it off, it all felt wrong. I wanted to believe her, but there was a part of me that couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was hiding something. She'd brushed off my questions so quickly, as if the answer was rehearsed, something she'd said before to cover her tracks. The day passed uneventfully, but I couldn't focus on anything. I found myself thinking about her texts, wondering who the person was. Was it really just a colleague from work? Was I being paranoid? Sophie had always been good at hiding things when she wanted to, but this felt different. I knew her, or at least I thought I did. I prided myself on being the kind of husband who knew when something was wrong, and right now, something was terribly wrong. Later that evening, Sophie got ready to go out. She told me she had plans to meet up with some friends, a casual dinner, nothing special. The idea of her leaving the house again, after everything that had happened, made my stomach churn. I couldn't let it go. I needed answers, and I needed them now. "Sophie, who are you meeting tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked at me briefly, then shrugged nonchalantly. "Just a couple of people from work, Declan. You know, the usual crowd." I stared at her for a moment, trying to figure out if she was telling the truth. But her eyes shifted, avoiding mine, and that's when it hit me. She wasn't just lying. She was avoiding the truth. Something was off. This wasn't the woman I had married. I watched her leave the house, my mind racing. Every step she took felt like 1,000 tiny betrayals. I knew I shouldn't have followed her. I knew it wasn't right, but the urge to know was overwhelming. I grabbed my coat and followed her from a distance, staying far enough behind so she wouldn't notice. It was late, and the streets were quiet, but I kept my distance, not wanting to alert her. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find, but I felt like something was about to happen. Something big. She walked into a restaurant downtown, a place I'd never been before, a little more upscale than the usual spots she would visit with friends. I waited outside for a while, trying to figure out what to do. Then I saw him. The guy from the messages. Mark. He walked up to the restaurant, wearing a casual jacket, his hands in his pockets. I could see them exchange a quick look, a familiar glance, one that sent a cold shiver down my spine. Sophie wasn't supposed to be seeing him, not alone. She'd never mentioned him before, and if they were friends, why didn't I know about him? Something didn't add up. I stood frozen in place, watching as they greeted each other with more than just a friendly hug. There was an intimacy in the way they touched, the way their bodies brushed against each other, like they were comfortable in a way I hadn't seen before. The laughter they shared, the way they leaned in close, sharing secrets, it all felt so wrong. I wanted to confront them right there, to storm into the restaurant and demand answers. But I couldn't. Something held me back, maybe fear, maybe the sense that I wasn't ready to face whatever truth was waiting for me. Instead, I watched as they entered the restaurant together, disappearing behind the heavy glass doors. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, trying to process what I had just seen. I had no idea what this meant, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't imagining things. Sophie wasn't the person I thought she was, and Mark, he wasn't just some random colleague. I walked back home, my mind reeling, my thoughts a jumble of confusion and betrayal. I wanted to confront her, to ask her what was really going on, but part of me was terrified of hearing the answer. What if everything I thought I knew about my wife was a lie? What if she had been hiding this from me for months, maybe longer? That night, Sophie came back later than usual. She was acting normal, but I could see the subtle changes. The way she moved around the house, the way she avoided my gaze. It was like she knew that I knew, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I knew something was about to break, but I wasn't ready for what happened next. The next morning, Sophie left early, as usual. But this time, she left her phone behind. I don't know why I did it. I wasn't proud of it, but the temptation was too much. I had to know what was really going on. I unlocked her phone, my hands trembling as I searched for answers. What I found was worse than anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just messages from Mark. It was an entire thread of conversations, intimate ones, full of details I couldn't believe. She wasn't just casually texting him. She was sending him pictures, planning secret meetings, and talking about things she'd never told me. The words on the screen burned into my mind. I scrolled through the messages, each one more shocking than the last. I miss you already, one said. Can't wait to see you again tonight, said another. They weren't just words on a screen. They were a betrayal. A deep, cutting betrayal. I sat there, frozen, unable to move. I didn't know what to do next. How do you confront the person you love when you've just uncovered the darkest part of their life? How do you even begin to ask the questions that need to be asked? The truth was staring me in the face, and I was terrified of it. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't let it go. I had to confront her. I had to face whatever was coming. And I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The messages kept flashing in my mind, like a movie on loop that I couldn't turn off. Every text, every flirtatious word Sophie had sent to Mark felt like a slap in the face. The betrayal was too real, too raw. I kept telling myself I needed to confront her. I needed to ask her what the hell was going on, but every time I thought about it, I froze. What if I was wrong? What if this was just a misunderstanding? Could I really accuse her of something as serious as infidelity without being absolutely sure? But I knew deep down that the proof was right in front of me. There was no denying it anymore. Sophie had been hiding something from me, and no matter how much I didn't want to face it, I had to. The thought of her lying to my face for so long made my blood run cold. I couldn't continue pretending everything was fine, pretending I didn't see the cracks in our relationship. This was it, the moment everything changed. When Sophie came home later that evening, I was already waiting for her. My nerves were shot, my mind racing, but I knew I had to do this. As she walked through the door, I didn't even let her get her coat off before I confronted her. Sophie, we need to talk. She looked up at me, surprised, but her face quickly masked it with that familiar, carefree expression she had perfected. What's going on, Declan? You look serious. Don't play dumb with me, I snapped. I know about Mark. Her eyes immediately darted away, and I saw her swallow hard, her mouth going dry. It was the smallest of reactions, but it was enough. The panic flashed across her face before she covered it up. I could see the guilt in her eyes, and that told me everything I needed to know. I don't know what you mean, she said, her voice a little too calm, too controlled. Cut the crap, Sophie. I saw you with him last night. I saw the way you looked at each other, the way you two were acting together. Don't lie to me. I watched as her shoulders tensed. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, looking like she was trying to figure out how to escape. But she didn't move, didn't try to leave the conversation. You followed me? She asked, her voice almost incredulous, like she couldn't believe I'd done it. I could hear the frustration in her tone, and that only made me angrier. Yeah, I followed you. Because I know something's going on, Sophie. I know about the messages, the texts, the pictures you've been sending him. Her face went pale, and she looked like she'd been hit with a freight train. For a second, I thought she might break down, tell me everything. But instead, she straightened her back, her jaw tightening. It's not what you think, Declan, she said, almost pleading. It's complicated. Complicated, I repeated, incredulity rising in my voice. You've been texting him like you're in some sort of relationship, Sophie. You've been meeting him behind my back, lying to me for who knows how long. And now you're telling me it's complicated? She took a deep breath and finally met my gaze. It's not about what you think, she said, her voice shaking now. I never meant for it to go this far. Then what the hell is it, Sophie? What is going on between you two? I asked, my frustration boiling over. I was shaking now, my hands clenched into fists. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I had to hear it from her, no matter how much it hurt. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor as if she was trying to find the words to explain. Then, with a sigh, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to admit that I was unhappy. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Unhappy? All this time, everything had seemed fine. Sure, we weren't the perfect couple, but we had a life together. We shared moments, memories, plans. To hear her say she'd been unhappy made my heart twist. Unhappy with what, Sophie? With me? She nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with tears. It's not that simple. I've been feeling disconnected for a while now. And then Mark came along, and it felt easy, Declan. He listened to me. He paid attention to things I'd been missing. So, this is all about attention? I asked, my voice rising. You've been talking to him, meeting him behind my back because you needed attention? It wasn't just attention, Declan. It was Something I've been missing for so long. Something you couldn't give me. I never meant to hurt you." Her words were like daggers. Each one pierced deeper into my chest. She was telling me that I wasn't enough, that I hadn't been enough for her, that the love we shared, the life we built, wasn't enough to keep her satisfied. "I can't believe this," I whispered, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "I gave you everything, Sophie. I trusted you. And you've been hiding this from me, lying to my face." Sophie's shoulders trembled as she took a step closer to me. "I'm sorry, Declan. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear." But it was too late for apologies. It was too late to fix what had already been broken. The trust we had built over the years had shattered, and I didn't know if it was even possible to put the pieces back together. I stood there, looking at the woman I had loved for years, and in that moment, I realized something. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had married, was no longer the same person, and I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sophie," I said quietly, my voice barely audible. She reached out for me, but I stepped back. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. Not after everything I had just learned. "You need to leave, Sophie," I said, the words coming out of my mouth like a command I didn't want to make, but had no choice but to say. Sophie froze, her face filled with shock and regret. "Declan, please. I need time to explain." But I shook my head. "No, Sophie. I don't need explanations. I need you to leave." And just like that, everything changed. The woman I had shared my life with was no longer the same. The trust was gone, the love was fractured, and I wasn't sure if I could ever piece it all back together. I watched her walk out the door, and for the first time in years, I felt utterly alone. It wasn't the first time Sophie had left in the middle of an argument, but this time was different. This time, there were no words of comfort or hope. "No, I'll be back in a few hours." It was as if she was slipping away, slowly, irreparably. As the door clicked behind her, I stood there in the silence of our empty house. I tried to process what had just happened, but nothing made sense. Nothing could explain what she had done. I didn't sleep that night. The hours dragged on, and the quiet was deafening. My mind was caught in a loop, unable to stop playing back everything I had learned. Sophie had been unhappy, she'd been lying, and worse, she'd been hiding it behind the facade of our life. I kept thinking about Mark, about how easy it had been for Sophie to slip away into someone else's arms, to confide in him when she had stopped sharing with me. The next morning, Sophie came back. She didn't knock. She didn't call. She just walked in as if nothing had happened, as if the conversation from the night before had never taken place. I could feel the tension in the air the second I saw her standing there in the hallway. She was wearing the same tired expression, as though she had rehearsed what she was about to say. But this time, I wasn't going to let her spin her lies. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. "Sophie," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "We need to talk." She flinched, her eyes shifting to the ground. I could see the weight of what she had done bearing down on her. "I know, Declan. I'm sorry. I didn't want it to go this far." I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "Sorry? You think a simple apology is going to fix this? You've been seeing him behind my back, lying to me, and now you're going to apologize like it's no big deal?" Sophie swallowed hard, clearly trying to gather her thoughts. "It wasn't like that, okay? It wasn't. It wasn't about him. It was about me. I was feeling lost, Declan. I was losing myself in this routine, in this life that felt like it was closing in on me. And Mark, he made me feel like I was alive again." I clenched my fists at my sides, anger bubbling to the surface. "So, instead of talking to me, your husband, the person you're supposed to be honest with, you decided to turn to someone else? A stranger? A man you've been secretly meeting with behind my back?" "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I felt so alone, Declan. I felt like you didn't see me anymore, like I was invisible to you. And when Mark started paying attention, I didn't know how to say no. It wasn't about him. It was about me needing to feel seen, to feel important." Her words cut deep. I could feel the sting of her betrayal, but more than that, I could feel the abandonment. She was telling me that I had failed her, that I wasn't enough, and I wasn't sure how to respond to that. The anger inside me was building, but it wasn't just anger anymore. It was pain. Deep, crippling pain. "Sophie, you could have told me. You could have come to me with anything, but you chose to hide it from me. You chose him over me. Do you even realize what you've done?" She shook her head, her face full of regret, but it wasn't enough. Regret didn't undo what had already been done. I didn't know how to fix it, Declan. I didn't know how to fix me. You were always so distant, so focused on your work. You didn't see me anymore. I closed my eyes, taking in a shaky breath. I did see you, Sophie. I was here. I was with you. But I didn't know you needed something more. You never told me. Instead, you went behind my back, and now everything is ruined. I wanted to keep shouting, to keep asking her how she could betray me like this, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. The damage was done. She had already made her choice. Do you love him? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It was the question I had been avoiding, the one that I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. But I had to know. I had to know if everything I had built with Sophie meant nothing in the end. She looked at me, her eyes filled with confusion and sadness. I don't know, Declan. I don't know what's going on between me and Mark. But I know that I love you. I still love you. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to go back to what we had. I took a step back, overwhelmed by the weight of her words. You can't fix this, Sophie. You can't go back. Because you've already crossed a line. You've already broken my trust. And I'm not sure how to even begin to trust you again. She reached out to touch me, but I stepped away. I couldn't allow myself to be touched by someone who had shattered everything we had built together. I couldn't let her feel like it was all okay now, just because she was sorry. I need you to leave, Sophie. I said, my voice cold, detached. I need space. I need to figure out what's left of this. Her face crumpled, and I saw the tears start to well up in her eyes. Declan, please don't do this. Don't shut me out. I swear I'll make it right. I'll do anything. But I shook my head. It's too late for that. You've already made your choice. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Sophie standing there, pleading. But I didn't care anymore. I needed to protect myself, to salvage whatever was left of my dignity. If she couldn't see that what we had was worth fighting for, then there was no point in fighting for it anymore. I couldn't change the past, and I couldn't change Sophie. But I could change how I moved forward. And right now, moving forward meant putting up a wall. A wall that would keep her out. A wall that would protect me from the hurt she had caused. And so, I watched her leave. Not because I wanted her to go, but because I needed to find out who I was without her. Without the lies, without the hurt. I needed to find out who I was before she had torn me apart. Days passed, and every hour felt like a weight on my chest. Sophie was gone. She had packed a few things, leaving behind only the memories of what used to be. The house felt eerily quiet without her presence. There were no more rushed mornings, no soft laughter over dinner, no subtle smiles across the room. It was just me, alone in a place that had once felt like home, now hollow and unfamiliar. I tried to keep busy. I buried myself in work, pushing myself further into projects I'd been neglecting for months. But nothing could fill the void. I'd never realized how much I had relied on her, how much of my own life had revolved around her. It wasn't just the intimacy I missed, though that was painful enough to deal with. It was the fact that she had been my person, my constant, my companion. And now she was gone. But as much as I wanted to ignore everything that had happened, there was no avoiding it. Every time I walked through the door, I expected to hear her voice, to feel her presence. Every time I sat down to a meal, I looked across the table and expected her to be there, sitting with that familiar look in her eyes. But she wasn't, and the silence that filled the space between us was deafening. It echoed with all the unspoken words, the lies, the betrayals that neither of us had been brave enough to face. I couldn't stop thinking about Mark, about the way Sophie had looked at him, the way she had leaned into him so easily, as though she had forgotten the vows she'd made to me. I wondered how long this had been going on. How long had she been lying to my face, pretending everything was fine while secretly meeting with him? And how had I not seen it? How had I not noticed the signs? I had so many questions, but no one to ask. Sophie wasn't here to answer them. I had cut myself off from her, and in doing so, I had cut myself off from the answers I desperately needed. But as the days went on, something inside me began to shift. I realized that I didn't need her answers anymore. I had to start answering my own questions. I had to start living for myself again. One evening, I was sitting on the couch, mindlessly flipping through TV channels when my phone buzzed. I wasn't expecting anything, so I picked it up absently. To my surprise, it was a message from Sophie. The notification was simple. Can we talk? At first, I was frozen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend like nothing was wrong, that I didn't care. But another part of me, the part that had spent days wondering if I had done something wrong, if there was a way to fix things, wanted to hear what she had to say. I stared at the screen for a long time before I finally typed out a response. Why? The reply came almost instantly. I need closure, Declan. We both do. I read it a few times, letting her words sink in. Closure. What did that even mean? How could we get closure when everything between us was built on lies? How could we find peace after all that had happened? The anger flared up in me, and I quickly typed back. Closure? You want closure? After everything, now you want closure? My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I fought the urge to send something more bitter, more hurtful. I didn't want to go down that road again. I didn't want to give her that power. I put the phone down and took a deep breath. What was closure really? Was it something that would make me feel better, or was it just another excuse for her to slip back into my life? Was I ready to hear what she had to say, knowing I might never get the answers I needed? Or was this just another way for her to ease her own guilt, without considering the damage she had done to me? I let the phone sit on the coffee table, the buzzing notifications growing louder in the silence of the room. Part of me wanted to block her, to pretend like she never existed. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, wanted to hear her side of the story. It was a dangerous game, but I couldn't help myself. I was still tied to her, still trying to make sense of the mess she had left behind. The next morning, I finally responded. Fine. Meet me at the cafe. We'll talk. I wasn't sure what I expected when I arrived. Part of me was hoping for some form of apology, for her to admit everything, for her to beg for forgiveness. But another part of me wasn't sure I even wanted to hear it. Maybe I just wanted answers, raw and real. I wasn't sure anymore. All I knew was that I needed this meeting. I needed to know where we stood, what had happened, and whether there was any hope of healing, or if it was all just too far gone. I arrived early, choosing a table in the far corner of the cafe, away from the prying eyes of the people who might know us. My mind was racing with all the things I wanted to say, all the accusations I wanted to throw at her. But when she walked in, my heart skipped a beat. Sophie looked different. She wasn't the same woman who had walked out on me. There was a sadness in her eyes, an exhaustion that hadn't been there before. Her face was pale, and she looked like she hadn't been sleeping. The same woman who had walked out of my life with such certainty now looked lost. She sat down across from me, her hands nervously clutching the coffee cup in front of her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tension in the air was thick, and I could feel the weight of everything that had passed between us pressing down on both of us. Finally, Sophie broke the silence. I've been thinking about everything, she said, her voice quiet. About us. About what happened. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to yell, to tell her how much she had hurt me, how much her betrayal had torn me apart. But I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. I didn't want to lose you, Declan, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't want to hurt you. I was just so lost. I thought that if I could find something outside of us, something that made me feel alive again, it would fix everything. But it didn't. It only made everything worse. I was running away from the wrong things. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't. I had been hurt too much. I had seen her walk away, seen her choose someone else, and I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Sophie, I said softly, my voice raw. But I need you to understand how much this has changed me, how much this has changed us. Sophie nodded, her eyes filled with tears. I understand, she whispered. I just hope one day you can see that I never meant to destroy what we had. I looked at her for a long time, wondering if I could believe her, wondering if I could ever trust her again. But I wasn't sure. And in that moment, I realized something important. I didn't need to rush the answers. I didn't need to rush forgiveness. This wasn't something that could be fixed in a day, or even a week. This was something that would take time. Maybe someday, we could find a way to heal. But for now, I needed to focus on myself. I needed to rediscover who I was without her, without the lies, without the pain. And only then would I know if there was any chance of us finding our way back to each other. Sophie's confession lingered in the air, heavier than anything I had ever felt before. Her words, the apology, the regret, the fragile hope, swirled around me like smoke, impossible to grasp, just slipping through my fingers. I had spent weeks in the aftermath of her betrayal, haunted by every decision I had made, every glance she had shared with Mark, and the life we once had. I had convinced myself that I was ready for answers, that I wanted closure, but when Sophie finally sat across from me, tearfully explaining how lost she had felt, something inside me froze. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she was truly sorry and that maybe, just maybe, there was a way back to what we once had. But every part of me screamed that trusting her again would be a mistake. The way she had walked away from me so easily, the way she had turned to another man when things got tough, the lies she had woven around me for so long, it was too much. I wasn't sure if I had the strength to walk that path again. Sophie's eyes locked onto mine, searching for something, anything, that might reassure her that I could forgive her. But all I felt was emptiness. I had loved her with everything I had, but now that love felt like it had been taken from me, stolen in the dark of night. And I didn't know if it was even possible to reclaim it. "I'm not sure what you want from me anymore, Sophie," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside me. "You say you're sorry, but the damage is done. You've already crossed a line I can't ignore." Her face twisted in pain, her hand shaking slightly as she reached out across the table. "Declan, please, I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I swear, we can make it work. I've never loved anyone like I've loved you. What we had wasn't a lie, it wasn't fake. I just lost my way." The words felt hollow, no matter how sincere her voice sounded. There was too much that had been shattered, too much that could never be repaired. "You lost your way?" I asked, my tone growing darker. "Sophie, that's not just losing your way. That's completely abandoning everything we built. You turned to someone else. You sought comfort in another man when I was right here, beside you. That's not a mistake, that's a choice." Tears welled in her eyes, and I watched her struggle for words. "I never wanted to hurt you, Declan. I never wanted to be that person. But I didn't know how to fix it, how to fix us. I was looking for something outside of this marriage to feel alive again. And I found it in him. But it didn't mean anything. I realized that too late. I realized how much I love you, how much I need you." The pain in her voice was real, but that didn't change what had happened. The woman sitting in front of me had shattered my trust in ways that were irreversible. I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way again. Sophie's hands fell into her lap, and for the first time since we sat down, I saw her as a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. The strong, confident woman who had once shared my life was now broken, desperate, and looking for something from me that I wasn't sure I could give. There was so much unresolved between us, so much anger, so much confusion, and yet there she was, sitting in front of me, waiting for me to somehow put it all back together. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping across the floor, and I felt Sophie's eyes following me, full of unspoken questions. I needed space. I needed to think. "I can't do this right now, Sophie. I need time. I need to figure out if I can even look at you the same way again. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay, because it's not." Sophie stood up too, reaching for my arm, but I pulled away. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please don't give up on me." But I had already given up on us. I didn't say it out loud. I couldn't bring myself to, but I knew it. I knew that I had already been broken too many times to keep pretending that we could go back to what we were. The trust was gone. The connection was gone. And no amount of apologies, no amount of regret, would bring that back. It wasn't just about her affair with Mark. It was about everything that had led to this moment. The neglect, the distance, the things we'd both failed to say to each other. "Maybe we can talk again in the future," I said, my voice cold. "But for now, I need you to leave. I need to figure out who I am without you in my life." Sophie nodded, tears streaming down her face, and I could hear her quietly sobbing as she turned to leave. But I didn't move. I stayed rooted to the spot, watching her walk away for the last time, and for the first time in weeks, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just an overwhelming emptiness. In the days that followed, Sophie didn't reach out again. I knew she was giving me space, respecting my wishes, but I also knew she was lost. I had no idea where she was going, what she was thinking, but I didn't care. The moment I had let go of the idea of saving us, I felt the weight of her absence lift, only to be replaced by an uncomfortable freedom. I started going to therapy, trying to unpack the wreckage of my own life. I had no idea who I was anymore. Everything I had built, my life, my identity, was tied to Sophie, to us. And now that she was gone, I didn't know how to rebuild it. But I knew I had to try. It wasn't easy. Every day was a battle with myself. I found myself thinking of her more than I should, wondering what she was doing, where she was, whether she was happy. But at the same time, I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't felt in months. The heavy weight that had crushed me in our marriage was gone. The constant worry, the anxiety of trying to hold everything together, was no longer there. But there was a cost. I had lost her. And in losing her, I had lost a part of myself. I didn't know where we would go from here. I didn't know if I would ever forgive Sophie. But I was starting to understand that I needed to rebuild my own life, regardless of what happened between us. I needed to find my own happiness again, without relying on anyone else to fill the void. And that was the hardest part, learning how to be okay on my own. Time moved differently now. What used to feel like a day dragged on for what seemed like weeks, but in a way, it was also slipping away too fast. Sophie had been gone for a month of silence, a month of thinking, processing, and doing my best to pick up the pieces of my life that I had left behind, pretending to be whole when all I wanted was to disappear. The house, once filled with the noise of our daily lives, was now silent. The place I had once called home had become a monument to what was lost, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had torn everything apart. But in that silence, I started to find some peace. I started to rediscover parts of myself that I had buried for so long. For years, I had defined myself by my relationship with Sophie, by our shared plans, our shared dreams. But now that she was gone, I realized how little I had known about who I truly was. It wasn't just the marriage that had gone awry. It was that somewhere along the way, I had stopped living for myself and started living for someone else. I began spending more time doing the things I had once enjoyed. I dusted off the old guitar in the corner of the room and started playing again. I went for long walks in the park, listening to the world around me, allowing myself to feel the raw, unfiltered emotions that had been shoved down for so long. I started reading books I hadn't touched in years, books that made me think, books that made me question everything, about love, about life, and about myself. But the nights were the hardest. It was always at night that the loneliness crept in. The emptiness settled into my bones like a cold, uninvited guest. The bed that had once been shared with someone I loved was now a vast, empty space. It felt like a physical ache, a weight that pressed down on me every time I closed my eyes. I didn't want to miss Sophie. I didn't want to feel the aching hole that her absence had left, but I couldn't deny it. There were moments when I would find myself staring at the door, waiting for her to walk through it, waiting for her to say that she was sorry, that she was ready to make things right. But I knew better now. She wasn't coming back. Not the way I had imagined. She was gone, and we couldn't undo what had happened. What was left now was just a painful reminder of all the mistakes we had made, of the promises that had been broken and the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. Still, I knew I had to let go. I couldn't hold on to the anger and the pain forever. I couldn't let it define me. The process of healing wasn't linear. There were days when I felt strong, days when I thought I could finally move on. And then there were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable, when I questioned whether I was ever truly going to be okay again. But I kept going. I kept living. I kept trying to put one foot in front of the other, even when it felt like my world was falling apart. And slowly, as the weeks passed, something inside me began to shift. I began to see the light at the end of the tunnel, faint as it was. It wasn't about finding closure with Sophie. It wasn't about getting answers to the questions that still lingered. It was about finding peace within myself, about learning how to exist in the world without being consumed by the past. I hadn't spoken to Sophie since the day we met in that cafe. I hadn't reached out to her, and she hadn't tried to contact me either. Part of me wondered if she was doing the same thing, rebuilding herself, trying to find the peace I was so desperately searching for. But another part of me was afraid that if we crossed paths again, the past would come rushing back, and I would be sucked back into the same cycle of hurt and betrayal. But there was something else growing within me, something I hadn't expected. As much as I had been hurt, as much as I had wanted to bury her memory and move on, I was beginning to understand that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending the pain didn't exist or that I wasn't still scarred by what happened. Forgiveness meant freeing myself. It meant not allowing what Sophie did to control my life anymore. And so, I made a decision. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but it was time. Time to reach out. Time to finally address everything that had been left unsaid. Time to stop letting the fear of what could happen keep me from doing what I knew was right. I grabbed my phone and, for the first time in a month, I typed a message to Sophie. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea for reconciliation. It was just a message, plain and simple, saying everything that had been left unsaid. Sophie, I think it's time we talk. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I'm ready to face whatever is left between us. No matter what, we need to have closure. It felt like the hardest thing I had done in weeks, but it was also the most necessary. For me. For both of us. I needed to let go of the anger, the bitterness. I needed to stop hiding behind the walls I had built around myself. And maybe, just maybe, Sophie needed the same thing. I didn't expect her to respond immediately. In fact, I thought it might take days before I heard anything from her. But to my surprise, just a few minutes later, the phone buzzed. "I'd like that, Declan. Let me know when you're ready." The simplicity of her message was like a weight lifting off my chest. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She didn't ask for anything other than an opportunity to talk. And I realized that in that moment, I was ready. I was ready to let go of the past and face whatever the future might hold, even if it meant confronting the parts of myself that I had been avoiding. So, I sent back a time and place for us to meet. It wasn't about reconciling right away. It wasn't about fixing everything in one conversation. But it was a start toward healing, toward moving forward, toward finding the strength to forgive and rebuild, not necessarily with Sophie, but with myself. And that was the first step on a long road that I still wasn't sure how to walk. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could see where it might lead. The day we met again felt surreal. I had no idea what to expect. Part of me was still holding on to the past, the hurt, and the anger. Another part was hopeful, perhaps too hopeful, but the desire to move forward, to take control of my own healing, outweighed the fear. We chose a small park bench by the lake, the same place where we had spent countless afternoons together years ago. The scene seemed fitting, a peaceful place for the storm that had raged inside both of us to finally settle. When I arrived, Sophie was already there, sitting quietly, her eyes looking out over the water. The last time I had seen her, there was nothing but sorrow between us. But now, as I approached, I saw a subtle change in her. She looked different, stronger, perhaps. It was as though she had been through the same painful transformation I had, and we were both emerging from it, raw and vulnerable, but also wiser. When she saw me, Sophie stood up slowly. Her eyes held the same regret they had when we first spoke, but there was something else there too. Peace, maybe, or the hope of redemption. I wasn't sure. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. I wanted to say something, but words felt inadequate. Finally, she spoke. "Declan, I'm so sorry. For everything. I know I can never undo what I've done, but I want you to know how truly sorry I am. And how much I regret everything that led to this moment." Her voice cracked with emotion, and I could feel the sincerity in every word. The hurt wasn't gone, not by a long shot. But there was something in her eyes now that made me realize something important. Sophie was no longer the woman who had walked away from me. She had changed. We had both changed. "I know you're sorry," I said softly, my voice steady despite the emotions that threatened to break through. "But I also know that we can't live in the past forever. We can't undo the mistakes we've made. But we can learn from them. I can learn from them." There was a long pause, and then Sophie nodded slowly. "I've been doing the same thing, Declan. I've been reflecting, trying to understand where I went wrong. And I've realized something important. I've spent so long blaming you, blaming us, for things that I was too afraid to face. I wasn't lost because of you. I was lost because I didn't know who I was anymore. And that's not your fault." We both stood there, the weight of the years we had spent together and the pain we had caused each other hanging between us. But in that moment, something shifted. The heaviness that had lingered in my chest seemed to lift, if only just a little. I had spent so long carrying the burden of the past, of our broken relationship, and in the span of a few words, I realized that I no longer needed to. "I don't know if we'll ever go back to what we were," I said quietly, "but I do know that I've learned something from all of this. I've learned how to be strong on my own, how to forgive, and how to move forward. Not just for you, or for us, but for myself." Sophie smiled through her tears, a bittersweet expression that seemed to acknowledge the truth of what I was saying. "I'm proud of you, Declan. You've always been strong. I wish I had seen that sooner." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. For the first time in a long time, we both understood that we couldn't change the past, but we could still choose what we did with the future. As we sat down on the bench, side by side, there was no dramatic resolution. No magical moment where everything was suddenly perfect. But there was peace. It was a small, simple peace. The kind that comes when two people who have hurt each other finally acknowledge their pain, take responsibility, and accept that healing is a long, messy journey. We talked for hours that afternoon, not about the past, but about the future, about who we were becoming and the lessons we were learning. We didn't make any promises to each other. There were no promises of reconciliation or rebuilding a life together. But what we did promise was this: to keep moving forward, to keep growing, to keep learning, whether separately or together. Sophie left that day with a final, quiet embrace, one that felt genuine but without the desperation we had once shared. I watched her walk away, but this time, I didn't feel the same emptiness. I felt lighter. I felt free. The next few months were not easy. I won't pretend that everything was fixed in an instant, but with each passing day, I found a new sense of clarity. I found new passions, new friendships, and, most importantly, a renewed sense of self-worth. I wasn't defined by my relationship with Sophie anymore. I was defined by my ability to stand on my own, to face life's challenges, and to choose joy, even after everything that had happened. In the end, I realized that sometimes the most painful experiences lead to the most beautiful transformations. Sophie and I had been broken, but we had also been reborn, as individuals, as people who had learned to love ourselves first. And maybe, just maybe, we would find our way back to each other someday. But for now, I was content with the person I had become. Life had moved on, and so had I.